First story by David Miller. It happened on a late summer night in 2018, after an electrifying concert in downtown Chicago. I was buzzing from the music, the kind of live performance that leaves your ears ringing and heart racing. But that night, my adrenaline rush turned into a different kind of thrill, one that still sends shivers down my spine. The concert wrapped up around midnight, and I said goodbye to my friends, opting to drive home alone. The streets were busy with people and the after-concert euphoria was palpable. I hopped into my car, a well-worn Honda Civic, and began the familiar drive home to the suburbs. As I left the city lights behind, the roads became quieter, and the night seemed to close in around me. The euphoria of the concert faded, replaced by a creeping unease. I chalked it up to fatigue. It had been a long day, after all. But then, things started to get weird. As I drove down a particularly isolated stretch of highway, my radio began to flicker. Static interrupted the music, and for a moment, I thought I heard a voice whispering my name. I shook my head, thinking it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. I continued driving, trying to focus on the road, but the feeling of unease grew. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat. My heart leaped into my throat. I snapped my head around, but there was no one there, just an empty back seat. Feeling rattled, I decided to stop at the next gas station to stretch my legs and clear my head. As I pulled in, I noticed the place was deserted. Not unusual for this time of night, but it added to the eerie feeling. I parked and got out, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. When I returned to my car, I had an overwhelming feeling that something was off. Hesitantly, I looked in the back seat again. Still empty. I laughed at myself, feeling silly for being so paranoid. But as I drove off, the radio flickered again. This time, the whisper was clearer, and it definitely said my name. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I turned the radio off, but the feeling of being watched, of not being alone, persisted. The rest of the drive was a blur of fear and confusion. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made me jump. When I finally reached home, I was a mess of nerves. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. I never found out what happened that night. Maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by the tiredness and the after effects of the concert. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I can't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone sitting in the back seat. And every time the radio flickers, I hold my breath, listening for a whisper that I hope never comes. That story from David certainly sets the bar high for eerie experiences, but what happened to Anna during her late night walk might just surpass it. Stay tuned as we delve into a walk that turned into a journey through the unknown. Second story by Anna Rodriguez. I'm Anna Rodriguez, and I'm going to tell you about a night that forever changed how I view my quiet little town. This happened a couple of years ago when I was working as a nurse at our local hospital. My shifts often ended late, sometimes well past midnight, and I had grown accustomed to the tranquil, if not slightly eerie, walks home. It was a Friday night, or rather early Sunday morning. The air was brisk, signaling the onset of fall. I remember zipping up my jacket and pulling my beanie down over my ears as I stepped out of the hospital. The streets were deserted, a common sight at that hour, and the only sound was the distant hum of the town's few late-night establishments. As I walked, I recall feeling a sense of peace. I've always enjoyed the stillness of the night, It's a stark contrast to the chaos of the hospital. But that night, something felt different. It wasn't something I could put my finger on immediately. More like a subtle shift in the air, a change in the energy around me. I was about halfway home when I first heard it. A faint scraping sound, like shoes dragging across pavement. I paused, straining my ears against the silence, but it stopped as suddenly as it had started. I shrugged it off as a stray animal and continued walking. But then I heard it again, closer this time, and unmistakably human. I quickened my pace, unease bubbling in my stomach. I didn't want to look paranoid, glancing over my shoulder, but the sound continued, keeping pace with me. It was as if someone was following me, mimicking my steps. My heart began to race, and I berated myself for not bringing pepper spray or something for protection. The town was safe, but in that moment, I felt anything but secure. I reached for my phone, thinking to call a friend or maybe even the police, but before I could, the sound stopped. I turned around swiftly, expecting to confront someone, but the street was empty. The only thing looking back at me were the dim streetlights and the long shadows they cast. I stood there for a moment, my breath fogging in the cold air, trying to make sense of what just happened. Deciding it was best to get home quickly, I resumed walking, but now every sound made me jump. The rustling of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, everything seemed amplified. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone playing a sick joke? Was I imagining things? As I turned onto my street, I heard it again, the scraping sound, but this time accompanied by a faint whispering. It was indecipherable, a low murmur, as if someone was speaking just out of earshot. My skin crawled, and I broke into a run. I didn't stop until I reached my front door. Slamming it shut behind me, I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. I peered through the peephole, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. Just the empty, quiet street. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of the wind made me think of those sounds, the dragging footsteps, the whispering. I kept telling myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The next day I asked around, half hoping someone would say they'd been out walking too, but no one had. It remained an unexplained occurrence, a story that I now share with a note of caution. I still walk home from my night shifts, but I'm more aware of my surroundings. The silence of the night no longer brings me peace. Instead, it serves as a reminder that sometimes we're not as alone as we think we are, and the sounds we dismiss might be more than just echoes in empty streets. Anna's experience is a chilling reminder of how quickly our sense of security can be shattered. But the open road can hold even more ominous secrets, as Mark Jennings found out during a routine truck drive. Get ready, because this next story takes us down a highway of mystery and suspense. Third story by Mark Jennings. I'm a long-haul trucker, with more miles under my belt than I care to count. But there's one journey that stands out, a night drive that I still can't fully explain. This happened a few years back on a route that took me through the heart of Texas, a path I'd driven countless times. But on this particular night, everything felt different. It was a clear night, the kind where the stars seem almost close enough to touch, and the moon casts a soft glow over the landscape. I remember feeling at ease as I set out, The familiar hum of my truck's engine, a comforting constant in my world of endless roads and transient destinations. A few hours in, as I was driving down a particularly remote stretch of highway, my radio started to act up. It was strange. The signal was usually strong out here, but that night it was just static, and then a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't clear, more like a distant echo, but it sounded almost like a distress call. I strained to hear, but it faded as quickly as it had disappeared, swallowed up by the static. Shaking my head, I chalked it up to some radio interference and focused on the road. But as I continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was then that I noticed the absence of other vehicles. Usually I'd pass a car or two, even in the dead of night, but there was nothing, just me and the road. I tried to push the unease aside, but it clung to me, heavy and unshakable. And then, things started to get weirder. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept catching glimpses of something by the roadside. Each time I looked, there was nothing there, just miles of empty landscape. But I could have sworn I saw figures, human shapes, just beyond the reach of my headlights. My heart started to race. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach. I told myself I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of not being alone on that desolate highway. I decided to stop at the next truck stop, thinking a coffee and a walk might clear my head. But when I pulled into the parking lot, it was deserted. Not a single truck or car, which was odd for a place that was usually bustling with activity regardless of the hour. I parked and stepped out, the silence of the night enveloping me. It was then that I heard it, a soft whispering, like voices carried on the wind. It was coming from the direction of the diner, a low, indistinct murmur. I approached cautiously, but as I got closer, the sound stopped. The diner was closed, dark and empty. Feeling more unsettled than ever, I hurried back to my truck. I locked the doors and started the engine, eager to put some distance between me and that place. But as I drove away, I saw something in my rearview mirror. It was brief, just a flash, but I could have sworn I saw a figure standing in the parking lot, watching me leave. The rest of the drive was a blur of fear and confusion. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made me jump. When I finally reached my destination, the sun was rising, casting a warm, reassuring light over the world. But the relief I felt was tinged with unease. I've driven many roads since then, but I've never forgotten that night. Sometimes I wonder what I saw, what I heard. Was it just the isolation playing tricks on me? Or was there something more? Something lurking on that lonely road? I guess I'll never know, and part of me is okay with that. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Mark's encounter on the lonely Texas highway is a stark reminder of the mysteries that can lurk in the most familiar places. But as we turn to Rachel's story, we find that even a well-planned journey can unravel in a night of unexplainable events and terror. Fourth story by Rachel Green. I'm Rachel, and what I'm about to tell you is something I've only shared with a few close friends. It happened during a late-night drive to visit a friend in rural Pennsylvania. I've always enjoyed driving at night. The roads are quieter, the world more peaceful. But this particular night transformed my love for solitary drives into something much more unsettling. It was a warm summer night, and I was driving through the scenic back roads, a route I'd chosen for its beauty and tranquility. The full moon cast a silvery glow over the fields and forests, creating a serene landscape. I remember feeling completely at ease, my favorite playlist humming softly through the speakers of my trusty old Jeep. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a dense fog beginning to settle over the road. It wasn't unusual for this area, but the speed at which it enveloped everything was startling. Within minutes, the visibility dropped drastically, and I had to slow down to a crawl. The once familiar road now seemed alien, shrouded in mist. As I cautiously navigated the winding road, a sense of isolation crept over me. The fog seemed to muffle all sound, enveloping me in a cocoon of silence. It was then that I started to feel like I wasn't alone. Every now and then, I thought I saw shadows moving in the fog, just beyond the reach of my headlights. I told myself it was just the play of light and mist, but a small part of me wasn't convinced. Then, the car's electronics started to act up. The radio began to switch channels on its own, cycling through static and snippets of random broadcasts. My GPS flickered and went blank, leaving me without guidance on the now unfamiliar road. A creeping sense of dread began to take hold, a feeling that something was very wrong. I considered turning back, but the thought of navigating the foggy roads made me hesitate. I decided to press on, hoping to drive out of the fog and find a place to stop and regroup. But the further I drove, the more disoriented I became. The road seemed to twist and turn in ways I didn't remember. The landscape, an unrecognizable maze of shadows and fog. Then, amidst the static of the radio, I heard a voice. It wasn't coming through the speakers, though. It sounded like it was inside the car, a whisper carried on the air. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sent chills down my spine. I turned the radio off, but the whispering continued, a soft, unintelligible murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Panic set in. I started to feel like I was being watched, like something was lurking in the fog just out of my sight. My heart raced as I scanned the roadside, but there was nothing, just the dense, impenetrable mist. After what felt like hours, but was likely only a few minutes, I saw a light ahead. It was a small roadside diner, its neon sign a beacon in the fog. I've never been so relieved. I pulled into the parking lot and rushed inside, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the car and the road. The diner was warm and brightly lit, a stark contrast to the eerie world outside. A few locals were sitting at the counter, and the waitress greeted me with a friendly smile. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, trying to calm my frayed nerves. As I sat there, the fog outside began to lift, revealing the familiar road once again. The sense of dread slowly ebbed away, replaced by a feeling of confusion and disbelief. What had just happened? Was it all just a product of my imagination, fueled by the fog and the isolation of the road? I didn't linger at the diner. As soon as the fog cleared enough, I got back on the road, eager to put distance between myself and that strange, unsettling experience. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but the feeling of relief was overshadowed by lingering questions. To this day, I can't explain what happened on that road. Was it just a series of coincidences? The fog? The car's malfunctioning electronics? My overactive imagination? Or was there something more to it? Something hidden in the mist and the silence of that night? I still enjoy night drives, but now there's always a part of me that's wary, listening for whispers in the wind and watching for shadows in the fog. Rachel's journey through the misty backroads leaves us pondering the mysteries that can hide in the most innocuous of settings. But our final tale, from Chris Thompson, takes us into the heart of the countryside, where a serene night walk becomes a descent into a realm of unexplainable occurrences and deep-seated fear. Fifth story, by Chris Thompson. My name is Chris, and what I'm about to recount is an experience that's etched into my memory, a night that transformed my perception of the tranquil countryside. This happened a few years back in the rural outskirts of Virginia. I had always found solace in the solitude of nature, often taking long walks at night to clear my head and enjoy the serenity. It was a clear night, the kind where the stars seemed to light up the sky, casting a gentle glow over the fields and woods. I remember stepping out of my house, taking a deep breath of the crisp, fresh air, feeling the unusual sense of peace that came with these nocturnal strolls. As I walked along the familiar path, the only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The night was still, almost eerily so, but I was used to the quiet. It was why I loved these walks. The world felt like it was mine alone. About a mile into my walk, I started to feel a strange sensation, like I wasn't alone. It was subtle at first, a faint rustling in the bushes, a slight shift in the shadows. I stopped, listening intently, but the sound ceased, and the stillness returned. I shrugged it off as a small animal, perhaps a rabbit or a fox, and continued on. But the sensation grew stronger. The rustling followed me, keeping pace as I walked. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, moving through the shadows just out of sight. My heart rate picked up, a mix of fear and curiosity urging me to quicken my pace. Then came the whispers, soft, indistinct, as if carried by the wind. They seemed to come from all around, a chorus of hushed voices that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't make out any words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was as if the night itself was speaking to me. Panic set in. I started to run, my footsteps loud against the path. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were chasing me. The familiar countryside had turned into a labyrinth of fear. Every tree and bush a potential hiding place for whatever was following me. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the lights of my house in the distance. Never had I been so relieved to be home. I burst through the front door, locking it behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I peered out the window, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness. But there was nothing. Just the quiet night, as if nothing had happened. I didn't sleep that night, nor many nights after. Every sound was a reminder of those whispers. Every shadow a potential threat. I scoured the internet for explanations, tales of hauntings or natural phenomenon that could explain what I experienced, but nothing fit. I've taken many walks since then, but never at night. The countryside, once a source of peace, now feels like a place of hidden dangers, a realm where the line between reality and something else blurs. I still love the beauty of nature, but I've learned to respect its mysteries, to acknowledge that there are things beyond our understanding lurking in the shadows of the night. Chris Thompson's eerie encounter in the quiet countryside reminds us that sometimes the most peaceful settings can harbor the most unsettling secrets. These tales of the night have taken us on a journey through the shadows of reality, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and fear lurks in the most unexpected places. Thank you for joining me in exploring these haunting tales of the night. If these stories have stirred your curiosity or sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. be sure to check out the video on the end screen. It's one of my personal favorites and promises even more chilling narratives. Until our paths cross again in the mysterious world of the night, stay safe and keep an ear out for the whispers in the dark. Goodbye, and may your nights be free of unseen passengers.